Ah, the redemption arc. Truly one of my favorite tropes in all of storytelling. If done well, it's one of the most compelling stories one can tell. But if done poorly, it can really sour an otherwise good story for the audience. Two of my favorite television series of all time are Avatar: The Last Airbender and She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, in no small part because both of them feature stellar redemption arcs. Quick note that the spoilers are about to start, so if you haven't seen either of those, this is your only warning. In Avatar, we have Prince Zuko, the banished prince who would go on to become the Fire Lord, who would lead the world into a new era of peace. In She-Ra, we have Catra, the traumatized Horde commander who would go on to help save the universe from Horde Prime with the power of love. Both Catra and Zuko end up redeemed at the end of their respective stories, yet for some reason, there's a lot less pushback on Zuko's redemption than there is for Catra's. Everyone was rooting for Zuko to be redeemed, while many people don't think Catra deserved redemption. Why is that? Was it because Zuko had to work harder to earn forgiveness? Not really. From the moment they each made their big decision, they had very similar experiences. Now, Zuko actively sought out the heroes while Catra had to be rescued, which meant they had different journeys of growth, but they each put themselves in life-threatening danger to save the lives of the heroes, then were almost immediately forgiven by the protagonist, which meant the supporting heroes quickly forgave them too. Once Catra had sacrificed herself to save Glimmer, and Adora had decided to go back for her, the others didn't need much convincing. And once She-Ra told the other princesses that Catra was on the good side, they let her in on the spot. Once Zuko had risked his life to save the heroes from Combustion Man, and Aang had decided to forgive him, Sokka and Toph fell quickly in line. Katara needed a bit more convincing, but within a few episodes she had forgiven him too. As different as their journeys to the point of the moment of truth were, their subsequent paths to earning the forgiveness of the heroes weren't too different. Was it because Catra did more evil than Zuko? Again, not really. Zuko burned villages, attacked innocent people, was cruel to his subordinates, kidnapped the protagonist, mugged strangers, and helped conquer Ba Sing Se for the Fire Nation, nearly allowing the Avatar to be destroyed in the process, which basically would have damned the world. Similarly, Catra also burned villages, attacked innocent people, was cruel to her subordinates, and kidnapped the protagonist. In addition, she injured the heroes with tech, she helped conquer Selenius, and she opened a portal that almost destroyed the world. They existed in vastly different worlds, and within wildly different stories, but it would be difficult to argue that either one of them was less redeemable based on their past actions. So why? Why were so many more people rooting for Zuko to be redeemed than Catra? I believe that this has a lot to do with a phenomenon that I'm calling the trajectory of their redemption arcs. Here's what I mean. On this graph, I have done my best to plot Zuko's redeemability, for lack of a better word, over time. You'll notice that despite having plenty of missteps, his redeemability generally trends upward. When we meet Zuko at the beginning of the story, he is a proud but naive banished prince. His redeemability starts quite low, considering he spends most of Book 1 as the primary villain. But over time, we learn more about his abusive childhood, we see him humanized, and we see him humbled. He struggles, and he learns difficult lessons that he could only learn by being brought low. His greatest mistake is when he sides with Azula at Ba Sing Se, which sets him back quite a bit. But once he has everything he thought he wanted, it finally sinks in that his honor was never something his father could give him, but something he could only give himself by choosing to do what's right. His journey had plenty of steps backward, but as a general rule, his redeemability trended upwards and reached to his moment of truth. On the other hand, we have Catra. When we first meet Catra, she is every bit as redeemable as Adora. Both of them are child soldiers fighting for the wrong side, but making the most of their situation and finding comfort in each other. After Adora leaves her, however, Catra begins to make decisions that drastically lower her redeemability, and those decisions seem to just get worse and worse. Even as we learn about her abusive upbringing, we are forced to watch her fall farther and farther away from the light. She is motivated by anger, frustration, and hurt, which leads her to do some truly awful things. Her quest for retribution and validation causes her to push away anyone who could possibly care about her, including Adora and Scorpia. I detailed her character arc in my video, Did Catra Deserve Redemption?, which I recommend you check out if you want to better understand her descent into darkness. All that to say, by the time she is on Horde Prime's ship in Season 5, she is not reaching the culmination of years of character growth. She's actually at the lowest point yet on her redeemability chart. While Zuko reaches his moment of truth at the moment he is most redeemable, Catra reaches hers at the moment she is least redeemable. It's fairly easy to explain why each of their arcs are shaped the way they are. The reason is because of who they had in their lives to guide them. Zuko had his mother, Ursa, who taught him as a boy how to be kind, brave, and perseverant. And he had his uncle Iroh, who guided him on his journey of becoming the wise, loving man he was meant to be. Catra, conversely, had Shadow Weaver, the abusive, manipulative woman who raised her, and Hordak, the literal supervillain attempting to take over the world. Oh, and she also had Scorpia, who, while amazing, was never exactly a guiding mentor figure to Catra. The more complex question is, what's the significance of their opposite trajectories? Why is it that we, as an audience, find it easier to root for characters whose redemption arcs have a positive trend than we do for characters whose redemption arcs have a negative trend? Well, there's a few reasons, but I think the simplest is that we have a short memory. That's not to say that we can't remember what happened more than a few episodes ago, because we definitely can, but at the same time, our opinions on characters are heavily weighted by the question, what have you done for me lately? When Zuko arrives at his moment of truth, the most recent memories we have of him are of his moment of clarity on the beach and his transformative conversations with his uncle. And if we go back further, he went through a literal metamorphosis in Book 2 that changed his whole disposition. With the exception of his massive step backward at Ba Sing Se, his recent actions have engendered a decent amount of confidence in his redeemability. On the flip side, when Catra arrives at her moment of truth, the most recent memories we have of her are her horrible treatment of Scorpia, Lonnie, Kyle, and Rogelio, her conquering of Selenius, her lying to Hordak, and her allegiance with Horde Prime. Double Trouble's reality check helps to sympathize her, and her conversations with Glimmer help us to connect with her, but overall she hasn't seemed very redeemable recently. When we, as viewers, watch their big redemptive moments, and we start pondering how we feel about it, our opinions are most heavily determined by what the characters have done recently, not what they did back in the early days of the series. And for that reason, it's a lot easier to root for Zuko to be redeemed than it is to root for Catra. But it's not just our short memories, it's also our hearts. When we watch redemption arcs, it is only natural that we place ourselves in the position of the protagonist. We ask ourselves, if I were in their shoes, would I be able to forgive this person? And I think we can all agree that it's much easier to forgive a person when we've seen them changing for the better. With Zuko, every time we see the kindness poking through the cracks, it makes us root for him a little bit more and a little bit more. Episodes like The Storm, or Zuko Alone, do a lot to show us his loving nature hidden beneath all the pain. But every time we see Catra presented with an opportunity to show kindness and instead choose to show wickedness, it causes us to root for her a little less and a little less. We imagine ourselves as Adora, and we think to ourselves, look at all the chances Catra had to change. Why should I forgive her now? Sure, there are a few moments peppered throughout the series where Catra's goodness pokes through, but for the most part, she doesn't show signs that she's changing for the better. And as humans, it's very hard for us to want people like that to be redeemed. Okay, so it's easier for us to root for redemption arcs with a positive slope than ones with a negative slope. Does that mean that Zuko's redemption is better than Catra's? This may surprise you, but I would argue no, it doesn't. Both are equally valid stories of redemption, and both stories need to be told. Zuko had to realize that destiny is something you choose for yourself. He had been ensnared for so long by the destiny his abusive father had given him, but the love and wisdom of his mother and uncle, coupled with more than a few humbling experiences, transformed him and allowed him to determine his own destiny, to pursue his own redemption. His story speaks to the ability that we each have to determine what kind of person we want to be, even if that means overcoming the person we once were. Zuko's redemption is very autonomous. He realizes that he has been on the wrong side, but he also knows that he still has a tremendous amount of worth. He knows he still has a role to play in this war, to help Aang take down the Fire Nation and restore balance to the world. He is able to confront his abuser with a renewed sense of purpose and inner strength, and has largely completed his redemptive arc by the time he does so. Catra's story is quite different. Unlike Zuko, she does not reach her moment of truth at a high watermark of self-worth, nor does she triumphantly confront her abuser and march off to join the heroes with her head held high. Instead, she arrives a broken and empty person. She is deeply aware of all the pain she has caused, and she feels the emptiness in her heart that has only grown worse due to her striving. At the moment of her crucial decision, Catra doesn't believe she is worthy of redemption, but she knows she wants to make good on the promise she made to Adora all those years ago. She wants to do one good thing in her life, and she's willing to throw her life away. The beauty of this is that it is this exact moment when Catra truly believes that she isn't worth redeeming, isn't worth saving, isn't worth loving, that she proves that she is. Catra's story shows us something that Zuko's doesn't. Even when we are at our absolute worst, we are still redeemable. Think about it. Most of Catra's redemptive growth occurs after Adora saves her. Unlike Zuko, she is still at rock bottom when her moment of redemption comes. All it took for Adora to come for her was one courageous, selfless act that proved there was still good within her. And I don't know about you, but that's a story I think a lot of us need to hear. As different as these redemptive character arcs are, they are both valid and both important. Zuko's story is meant to show us that we always have the power to determine our own destiny. We always have the power to do what is right, and that we still have the capacity for great good, even if our past is mired by great evil. Catra's story is meant to show us that even when we reach rock bottom, and we don't believe we are worth anything to anyone because of the things we have done, we are never too far gone. We are always worthy of redemption as long as we are simply willing to make the choice to be better. If I could leave you with one final thought, it would be this. As consumers of great stories, I would like to challenge all of us to be more open-minded to negative trajectories, not to shut them down on the basis of their challenging nature, because they have lessons to teach us that we won't find anywhere else, lessons that will reach people in unique ways. And that's what good storytelling is all about.